Hello and welcome to our This News Hour. I'm Daniel Kasahun with the news. In its statement issued on Tuesday, the Minister of Foreign Affairs accused the TPLF of destroying economic foundations of the people of Amhara. The TPLF has continued with its dangerous attempt of holding on to political power by subjecting people to fear. The statement read, in areas of North Gondar and Wollo that the group has invaded by rejecting the unilateral humanitarian ceasefire of the government, the TPLF has proved once again of its enmity to the Amhara people, the ministry said. Reports from occupying North Wollo and Gondar adjacent areas indicate that the TPLF is intent on devastating the economic lives of many households. As farmers in occupied territories recently reported, the terrorist TPLF soldiers and their co-opted peasant followers are stealing a ready harvest. These deeds of the TPLF will not contribute to the advancement of the people of Tigray, but rather foster hostility and resentment between the people of Amhara and Tigray. The atrocities the TPLF has committed and still is committing in Wollo and Gondar could only be explained as a last-ditch attempt to stay politically relevant, the statement noted. The United Nations Migration Agency has put its Ethiopia chief on administrative leave, citing an unauthorized interview in which she complained of being sidelined by UN higher-ups she claimed were sympathetic to Tigrayan rebel. There is also a rumor about UNFPA's chief, Robbie Corey-Dolly, recalled from the post from Addis Ababa. The departure of Eching, confirmed in a letter dated Monday and seen by AFP, risks further undermining an aid response to the needy. Last week, multiple recordings surfaced online of Eching and another senior UN officials granting a lengthy interview to J. Pierce. In the recordings, Eching, the International Organization for Migration chief of mission to Ethiopia, tears into colleagues who descended on Addis Ababa after the war broke out last November and, in her telling, sidelined officials on the ground. She also called the TPLF dirty and vicious. At one point, she accuses the rebels of plotting to have Tigrayan migrants workers facing deportation from Saudi Arabia sent to Rwanda. She says, quote-unquote, and then you don't know what guerrilla movement starts from Rwanda. I mean, it is dirty, close quote. She also vows never to return to Tigray. The world is watching as shock surrounding the United Nations over Ethiopia's recent decision to expel 7 United Nations aid workers, declaring persona non grata for interfering in its internal affairs. Although Ethiopia's move was common given global experience, some including United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres are obviously trying to make a mountain out of a mole. And yet, the barrage of insults and condemnation against Ethiopia over this move has shocked all peace-loving nations. The irony of the whole situation is that the United Nations and its Western allies expressed little, if any, shock when the TPLF raided Maikadra, killing innocent Amhara, while the expulsion of 7 United Nations officials created such a shock. The Muslim has more.
I welcome this opportunity to brief you concerning the situation in Ethiopia.
Ethiopia recently decided and expelled 7 UN staff members for meddling in its internal affairs. Following the decision, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres and other international actors expressed shock and dismay against the Ethiopian government.
There's an announcement by the government of Ethiopia to expel 7 senior UN officials, most of them humanitarian staff, particularly disturbing. This unprecedented expulsion should be a matter of deep concern for us all, as it relates to the core of relations between the UN and member states.
However, the shock of Guterres and UNICEF as chief has vibrated more shocks, not only from Ethiopians, but presumably from all peace-loving and democratic forces all over the world. There are ample reasons for this. First, the UN chief were not shocked at the genocidal crimes committed in Maikadra in November 2020 and the brutal attacks made against the National Army before Ethiopia was forced to send troops to Tigray. These forces never bothered to express shock, while thousands were assassinated and displaced in various parts of the country on top of massive property destructions. Which one is shocking? Declaration of persona non grata or genocidal crimes and all sorts of inhuman deeds. It has been a big shame to hear the UN chief who has to rather comments on investigation on its staff non-neutrality, interference and odd activities, expressing his shock on the contrary. On top of that, the Secretary General also breached the sovereign rights of receiving states to welcome or unwelcome, to accept or reject any foreign visitor, dignitary, envoy or employee to its territory that consider unlawful or a threat for their national interests. The Secretary General literally breached the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, which clearly stipulated the declaration of persona non grata under Ethiopia's-like circumstances. Apparently, Ethiopia's decision to expel the UN staff is in line with the stated convention. It is not, as alleged by some, a violation of international laws. In addition, the declaration of persona non grata is not a surprising event. It has been practiced for so many years without much rise. From 1990s to mid-2021, 477 persons have been declared persona non grata. Those declared persona non grata includes UN officials, ambassadors, diplomats, ministers, activists, journalists, singers, and others. While the persona non grata has such trends of practice across the world, it is disheartening to hear from the highly respected UN Secretary General and others grilling Ethiopia for doing nothing different. Alarmingly, countries that have exercised their sovereign rights or reciprocated persona non grata measures have also joined the shock and condemnation of the Secretary General as well. Casting such fallacy accusations cannot, however, tear apart the strong bonds of the UN and Ethiopia, the founding member of the institution. Ethiopia also distinguishes individuals from organizations, and it also believes all the sordid conspiracies haunting it could not imperil the harmonious international relations between and among countries, in addition to international institutions.
Gondar, a city of palaces and castles.
Now in the palace of Emperor Fasilides. Let's go inside and see what it's like. It has a unique Nubian structure and it was registered on the UNESCO Heritage Sites in 1979. Gondar, Gondar. This statue was made to commemorate the beloved Emperor Theodorus, on January 18th of 2012.
We're here to see some castles. World Heritage Site.
Welcome back. You are watching this news hour. Now it's time for watching trending news. Our colleague Snehata Amrat is here, and we are reviewing publications or websites in the past 24 hours. And what have you got from the media?
Thank you, Daniel. I've got just 2 points. The one is related with the UN news that you said so far, and the next one is the arrival of the African Foreign Ministers for the 39th ordinary session of the AU Executive Council. So coming to the first one, you might have just told our audience.
It's about the expulsion of the IOM head.
Yeah, now it's not just the expulsion, it's the recalling, and I'll get back to the
administrative leave.
Sure. And the UN has recalled another person, high official from Ethiopia, and that is the official for UN Population Fund, and she is Dania Gaile, and she was recalled for the same purpose, for just exposing the secrecy of the UN officials that were just working with TPLF forces. And it is just for the criticism of these UN senior officials that are, as Dania Gaile and the previous Kenyan senior official for the UN said, that these people were just working with senior government, UN officials and the TPLF forces. Since the war broke in Ethiopia, in northern Ethiopia, in Tigray, there were some UN officials sent with a special mission to Ethiopia. And these all were just tasked with working with TPLF forces, and reports were not just going directly to the country office, country representatives, but it goes directly to other areas, which other people which are working with TPLF forces. It is just these videos that
she had an interview with Jeff Pierce.
Jeff Pierce, sure.
And the information came out from his interview.
Yeah, in fact, for our audience, Dania Gaile and the previous lady were not just said or released by the UN officials, but this is just the AFP report that these two people were recalled, but the UN officials have not said any naming about who were recalled back. And surprisingly,
both relieved from their position.
Sure.
Yeah. And
surprisingly that you said some migrants from Saudi Arabia were to be deported to Rwanda, and the previous lady said no to this, and that was just to start a guerrilla fighting from Rwanda. And you know how the TPLF forces are just trying to escalate the tension in the entire East African. So they already just started in the Sudan region. We know that the TPLF senior official Debretsion Gebre Mikhail said they have some 30,000 troops in Sudan. And they were just trying to be smuggled into Ethiopia, but the Ethiopian National Defense Force said it deterred them. And these are just the points I would like to mention, but if I have to remind what the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said regarding this issue, this is just a continuation of the expulsion of the 7 UN officials that the government said they were just operating against the country's rules and against the mission of the United Nations. And it is after this that the UN is taking such measures as well. It's not about what they have said, I guess, because Antonio Guterres was saying the recent meeting that Ethiopia is in violation against the UN laws for humanitarian. But Ethiopia's permanent representative to the UN, Ambassador Taye Atskesselase, mentioned that the UN has no right to do this, and the UN has no right to ask for evidence for the expulsion, because several countries have done this and no one have put some evidence for that. What they say, and even on the UN Charter is that...
Yeah, he also said it's not against the UN Charter.
Sure.
And the country has the right to do so.
Yeah, and if, for example, if your country wants to the exchange of that special delegation for your country by the UN entities, you can just ask for the change of the person. This is what's put on the charter. But the meeting was the entire...
That's what Ethiopia is expecting.
Sure.
A replacement of the expelled persons by another officials.
Yeah, I personally feel that it is a clear bias by the UN to expel or to recall back some officials that were just working here for the humanitarian situation. On one hand, they are doing this. On the other hand, they are just saying that the humanitarian situation in Ethiopia is escalating.
Let's come to the issue of the 39th session.
My second point is that the African foreign ministers are arriving in Addis Ababa for the 39th ordinary session of the AU Executive Council, and this council will dwell on several issues, including the implementation of Agenda 2063. They will also deliberate on reports of several functioning or just accomplishments of the previous session, and also what was said. Just some agendas have to be approved, some reports have to be approved from the previous session. So it will be held from October 14 to 15.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sintayong, for your information.
Thank you so much.
The National Disaster Risk Management Commission says it is providing aid to the internally displaced people in Amhara and Afar regions. The Commissioner Matuku Kasa says the government is trying at its utmost to provide humanitarian assistance to people displaced in Afar and Amhara regions as a result of TPLF's attack. The number of IDPs in Amhara region has surpassed 600,000, he said.
በአሸባሪው ህወሓት ቡድን የተፈናቀሉ ዜጎቻችን ቁጥር በአማራ ከ600 ሺህ በላይ ነው።
The number of citizens displaced by the terrorist TPLF is over 600,000. About 351,000 of this figure are sheltered in Dese town. The schools in Dese and Kombolcha towns are used as shelters. Others are sheltered in North Gondar and Bamnat areas. Humanitarian aid is being delivered to these IDPs through the Emergency Coordination Center set up in Bardar City and Incident Command posts set up in Dese and Dabark towns. The aid is delivered by the government and partners. Our partners include Joint Emergency Operation, Food for Hunger, the Red Cross Society, and World Food Program. The number of displaced people in Afar is also increasing significantly. The same humanitarian assistance is being delivered to these IDPs as well.
The government has sent additional experts to the areas to further scrutinize the magnitude of the problem and the additional aid required.
ከ2008 ዓመተ ምህረት ጀምሮ ኤሊኖ ካስከተሉ ድርቅ ጀምሮ በሙሉ አቅም ነው እየሰራን የምንገኘው።
Our commission has attained an expertise in managing risk. We have been witnessing this since the 2015 catastrophe, but we are currently facing problems during distribution of aid. This emanates from not abiding by the established procedures and norms. Another issue is that we cannot access certain areas occupied by TPLF forces. Apart from this, we have no problem of supply at the moment.
Ethiopians are urged to redouble efforts in the social media outlet that, like Twitter, and assert the country's diplomatic and political interests to the world. In connection to the latest Twitter campaign against the Ethiopian Airlines, aviation analysts expressed the possibility of using the national carrier for different purposes in the time of urgency.
The social media is increasingly used as a means of communication between states. Diplomats and political leaders are ever more relying on Twitter in their daily practice to communicate with their counterparts. These exchanges occur in a view of global audience, providing an added level of scrutiny that is unique to this form of communication. Twitter arguably challenges traditional notions of diplomacy, where developing nations like Ethiopia are targeted. Ethiopia has been witnessing a massive Twitter campaign against its domestic affairs. The Western world commonly uses this account to coil Ethiopia's interest and support the TPLF clique to dismantle the country. CNN's latest report accusing the Ethiopian Airlines of transporting weapons is a clear showcase on how some Western institutions diving into Ethiopia's internal affairs. Such campaigns ignited another Twitter campaign by the Ethiopians to debunk such baseless propaganda against their country. In their Twitter counterattack, Ethiopians tried to magnify the success stories of Ethiopian Airlines. They revealed CNN's baseless and fake propaganda against the Ethiopian carrier. In an interview with CNN, aviation analyst Maria Shova slammed such accusations from CNN and explained possibilities of measures that an airline can take in an urgent situation.
And many countries have those kinds of laws, including the United States. In times of national emergency, the United States can declare that the civilian airlines become basically part of a fleet to serve the country, and the government can order them to become part of this national emergency. Now, every country has their own set of laws. Ethiopia's laws may be very different, and it's also different because they own the airline. The government owns the airline, but many countries have laws in place that allow them in times of emergency to use commercial planes, commercial airlines, to perform military, quasi-military functions.
Ethiopians are urged to redouble efforts in the social media outlets like the Twitter and communicate the country's diplomatic and political interests to the world.
The renowned anti-corruption advocate and Kenyan Pan-Africanist and motivational speaker of African issues, Professor Patrick Loch-Ontieno Lumumba, has urged the new government of Ethiopia, the people of Ethiopia, and an extension the continent to work in unison for the prosperity of the continent through a Pan-Africanism spirit. Kasan Chanji has the details.
Thank you very much. Let me start by congratulating you all, assuming as I do that you participated in elections, some of you, and that you are elected, and also aware that some of you have been appointed to serve as ministers in the new administration. Congratulations.
Professor Patrick Loch-Ontieno Lumumba is an internationally recognized lawyer, human rights activist, Pan-Africanist and public speaker, whose message focuses on African solutions to African problems. He is a doctor of laws on the law of the sea from the universities of Ghent in Belgium and the author of a number of books on law and politics. Upon the invitation of the new government of Ethiopia, Professor Patrick Loch-Ontieno Lumumba addressed ministerial cabinet on a subject of Pan-Africanism and called upon the ministers to work towards nurturing Pan-African ideologies.
That the subject of Pan-Africanism is one that remains as important today as it was, in my view, many years ago. Those of you who are familiar with the struggle for Pan-Africanism will remember its story, particularly through the activities of Africans in the diaspora. You'll particularly remember that prior to the much more famous meeting held in 1945 in Manchester, in the United Kingdom, Africans in the diaspora, particularly in the Caribbean, in Trinidad and Tobago, in Jamaica, were very particular about having connection with the continent of Africa.
Lumumba stressed the need to revive the paths Africa is following to define its destination. He pointed out that regenerating a continent through indigenous ideologies and solutions is quite important for the continent to let herself free from Western influence.
The drive was to decolonize Africa. And one of the things that amazes me is that at that time, these individuals did not have the internet, they did not have WhatsApp, they did not have the kind of communication that we have now. But it is amazing at how they were communicating. Even air transport was not as it is now. I was just recently reading the activities of one of the greatest Africans who, in my view, ever lived, and whom many people do not know about. The great Ghanaian James Emmons Kwegyir Agri, normally referred to as Agri of Africa, and how he traveled from the United States and went to many countries in Africa, traveling by sea and talking about why Africa should be united. And that was Pan-Africanism, the Pan-African spirit at that time.
Lumumba further called upon the people of the continent to work towards the revival of a Pan-African spirit to ensure the continent's decolonization and development.
That's all for this edition. Thank you for watching. Goodbye and stay safe.